doesn't want to say hi. It's fine.
That's all right. We will podcast without the input of the cat.
Yes.
We value her views, but we can do without her if we must.
Exciting as this has been for everybody, I'm actually kind of hyped. We are so close to the end of our little experiment.
You're right, and we've recently hit a huge milestone, which is there's a celebratory banner on our YouTube channel telling us that we have had 1,000 views.
Which is wild.
That's so many views. We have wasted so many hours of human time.
Like, even if you factor in the ones that are just like me listening to it on loop when I'm doing transcriptions, which I'm so sorry, people who I'm aware there are 2 of you at least, and I am so behind. But
We're doing our best.
Even if you subtract those, we still have so many hours of people's time that we've occupied.
So many actual human ears.
That's wild.
Yeah. We have at least one listener. Is my conclusion. And we have nearly finished season 1 of this nonsense.
We've nearly finished season 1 of this nonsense. We've gotten to a point where people we know, but people are commenting casually on episodes of the podcast to us, which is still very weird to me.
Mm-hmm. The most actionable feedback of which has been that we mentioned in passing possibly doing a bonus episode about like theoretical cults, and the only response so far has been all caps cults, cults, cults.
I mean, that's the most actionable feedback you've gotten. The most actionable feedback I've gotten is to stay away from video games forever.
Unfortunately, this is going to be a video game episode.
It is.
So we're sorry to that one person.
I'm very sorry. It's fine. She stopped listening. Stopped listening, didn't stop complaining.
Which is an incorrect procedure. If listener, you are welcome to not listen to us. Do not continue to complain if you do. That's just mean.
Yeah, it's
Please don't
very
be mean
helpful
to us.
If you're going to complain, you are contractually obliged to give us the clicks.
I think that's fair. I think
Get
there's a
new
reasonable
material
trade.
to complain about.
Absolutely. So we'll introduce ourselves first.
Yes.
Welcome, listener, to Analysis Roulette. My name is Duck. I use he, they pronouns.
My name's Dia. I use they, them pronouns.
And today we are doing a close reading of Dwarf Fortress.
Thing you do not read.
No, that has been one of the challenges.
Yes.
Because it is not a text where I can break it down line by line. It is a video game.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to summarize Dwarf Fortress and or close reading for the listener?
I think I will be better off summarizing close reading because my interaction with Dwarf Fortress has been the YouTube videos you sent me and I would say, valiant attempt to play it, which was stymied by the fact that every time I downloaded it from their website, my laptop crashed immediately.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yes, I did consider getting the paid version, and then I thought, no, I'm not doing that.
We don't make any money off this podcast, and therefore you should not spend money on this podcast.
If one of the listeners would like to pay me the cost of downloading Dwarf Fortress from Steam, we will do a bonus episode of Dwarf Fortress where I actually know what I'm talking about. That's the deal I will offer.
That would be amazing. That would be great.
Reach out to me.
Send us an email. Our email's in the description wherever you're listening to this. If you want to buy Dia a copy of Dwarf Fortress, we will play Dwarf Fortress for you.
Yeah, I will live stream the entire attempt. It will involve a lot of swearing.
And a lot of dying.
A lot of dying, which is bad, because I get very stressed out by video games. If you want to know how stressed out I get by video games, if you've ever played Kitten's game, I have never lost a kitten, because I get too anxious when they're running low on food and just sit there clicking as fast as my fingers can go.
Oh, baby.
I know. I'm quite proud of myself, but that is an indication of the level of anxiety I get.
You will hate Dwarf Fortress. Yes.
Yeah. I used to get panicky playing RuneScape.
Yeah. So Dwarf Fortress, as we mentioned, is a video game. The concept of Dwarf... We are only going to be talking about Fortress mode. There is also a thing called Adventure mode. I tried playing it a couple of times when it was much less successfully implemented, so did not get very far. Haven't played it in the Steam version. It's not what I'm here for. We're just going to ignore it. And there is a very minor mode called Legends, which is just when you look at the pre-generated history of a world. But Fortress mode is like the flagship way you play this thing. In Fortress mode, 7 dwarves go out into the wilderness to start a new colony of dwarves. And it's a survival challenge sandbox game, basically. You need to feed your dwarves and make them little bedrooms and fight off invasions and things of this nature. I have I probably have to count myself amongst fans, like the fandom in the broad sense of Dwarf Fortress, because I have been playing it for about 12 years.
Mm.
I was unemployed when I first downloaded it, and that's good because I downloaded it back when it didn't have any graphics at all, because this was 12 years ago, and it was just ASCII art.
Yeah.
I downloaded it, I opened up a quick start Dwarf Fortress guide, and then I played it for 28 hours straight.
Yep.
I have the right kind of brain for Dwarf Fortress. So I paid for the Steam version because I was like, just on the basis of how much I've played this, I owe you money. So even if I never touch this again, I feel I ought to buy this. But it's a video game. It has many complexities and difficulties. Less so now there's a Steam version that has graphics, but it is still quite there's a high learning requirement to play Dwarf Fortress, I think.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I'd already done most of that, so I did replay some Dwarf Fortress last week for the sake of this. It still works for my brain. It's still fun. Talk to me about close reading.
Yes. So close reading is honestly probably one of the more self-explanatory forms of analysis we've done on this show. It's the school of it's not really a school of literary criticism. It's usually a tool used to construct arguments in many different schools. But it's when you take a brief passage of a text, whether that's the whole thing or an excerpt, can really depend, and you do a sort of sustained, in-depth analysis of the word choices, the phrasing. It's looking at individual words and syntax rather than the overall meaning.
Right.
So if you've got a sentence like "the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog," you might go, okay, why quick? And obviously the answer to that in that case is because we need a
It
cue.
uses the right letters. Yeah.
We need a cue. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Or if you're looking at poetry, you might get one line of poetry, "to be or not to be, that is the question." And you're not really thinking about how that factors into the broader psychodrama of Hamlet. You're not really thinking about the overall arc of his struggle with this question of suicide and vengeance and continuing life when it seems unsustainable. You're looking at, okay, why does "to be or not to be" not say, "should I die"?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
the answer is, again, because it has to be the shape it is to give the feeling it gives. But you're saying, why? Why does these words in this order give me the feeling it gives me? And why would these words in a slightly different order do something slightly different?
Right. And as far as I understand it, also things like this book has this kind of tree in it. Not just why this kind of tree on like a poetic, metaphorical level, but also what does that tell us about the setting and the people who planted the tree and...
I mean, those are kind of things you can get from if the sentence you're close reading, for example, mentions a tree. That's one of the things you might pull out is, okay, the word maple
exactly.
is in this sentence. I can tell you that that word does this to the rhythm of it. It's 2 syllables. That's where the stress is. You can also say the person who wrote this had heard of a maple tree.
Right.
What you're doing is zeroing down on those little details. That's what makes it a close reading rather than just a reading.
Right. This is difficult to do to Dwarf Fortress.
Difficult to do to games in general, I would imagine.
Yes. I mean, well, yes, difficult to do to games in general, particularly difficult to do in a game that has very, very little in the way of dialogue. The closest thing to dialogue is because dialogue is most of the text in most video games.
Yeah.
Like most of the actual nailable down script that is in here is usually either dialogue or it is like books within the narrative itself where you can read the text.
That makes
Dwarf
sense.
Fortress has got fictional books, but you can't read them. The text has not been generated in that depth, and the dialogue is in terms of actual reported dialogue, there's about 12 lines, which you will not see all of them in every playthrough because they are just discussions you can have with the traders that visit your fortress.
Yeah.
And there are the thoughts of the dwarves themselves, who will be things like, "I was caught in the rain. It was annoying."
Very poetic.
Extremely poetic. So I have not really looked at what you'd call the script of the game for this because there's just such a limited amount there.
Yeah.
I have instead looked at what features of the game itself as a reasonable thing of consider it as the text of the game to be the mechanical aspects of the game.
Sense.
It's it's also interesting because Dwarf Fortress itself is sort of it's extremely concerned with small details.
This is the main thing I know about Dwarf Fortress. Yes.
Yeah, there is a classic explanation of what the game is like, which I will repeat here for those not familiar, which is the problem of if you pick up a beehive, you are instantly attacked by high-level monsters and killed. This is
Which is a problem.
because all several thousand, tens of thousands of bees are accounted for individually. And the lowest value an object can have is 1 dwarf buck, so you pick up a beehive and suddenly the value of your fort goes up by like 30,000 dwarf bucks, which is not reflected in the number of dwarves or amount of armor and weaponry you have. You cross a wealth threshold that gets you attacked by monsters. It's therefore vitally important not to start beekeeping too early, because there's a glitch in the game where a beehive is worth an absurd amount of money, and having too much money too early in the game will get you killed. It's been fixed now. The beehive it as a whole now has a value that more reasonably reflects how early in the game you can start beekeeping. So this doesn't happen anymore, but it's the sort of game where you can have that problem. It's a sort of game where you can have a thing called a thermonuclear kitten explosion.
Yep.
Because animals produce heat, and the heat is accounted for in the game, but not when they're in a cage. So you have a cage containing too many animals, and then you release them all. Physical temperature within your fortress can get so high that people start dying because of the number of cats. Which
Love that.
This is a simulationist game, and the thing about it as well is most video games are a consensus thing. Most video games have a team of programmers and designers. Dwarf Fortress is programmed by Tarn Adams. That's it. It's him. It's just him. So it's as much the work of a single mind as like any human endeavor can be. I'm sure.
It's an auteur video game.
Right. It's an auteur video game, which I don't mean to suggest means that there has been no one else's input into it. Of course there has been. People talk about their creative projects. People get comments and feedback and fan interaction, and it affects how they produce things going forward. But as much as anything can be, this is a work by a single author. It's a work of a single mind. And it is a extremely simulationist game. So to explain that term a little bit on like the games side, one way of thinking about games is narrativist versus gamist versus simulationist. A narrative game is focused on telling the story. So either a particular story or stories in general, and they de-emphasize what you might call like logical realism or skill challenges. So a lot of tabletop role-playing games you can run like this. You can, instead of saying, I'm going to do this, so I'm going to roll these very specific dice and apply these very specific rules, you can say, I'm trying to achieve this outcome. I'm trying to persuade this person to come with us. And then you can have that conversation, or quite often, like depending on the kind of game, you may make one roll for if that succeeds, or you may not make any rolls. It may not be the kind of game that requires you to make dice rolls if it's extremely narrativist. A gamist game, which I know sounds reductive, but it's a game that's focused on skill challenges and puzzles, and it means game as like a complex mechanical toy, where the enjoyment is from just messing around with the thing. So like Zelda games have puzzles that make limited narrative sense for why the puzzle exists. There's no reason why a tomb or a shrine or whatever would have these physics puzzles to get to the central point, but they're there because it's fun to solve the puzzles.
Sure.
That's why there's no like narrative reason for it to be laid out like that. That's not a narrativist approach. It's doing gamist stuff where it's going, here's the fun toy to play with. And then simulationist games are focused on either mimicking the real world or representing another world in realistic ways. So like in an RPG, That's things like fall damage or travel time, or if you have a hunger meter and you have to consume food to restore it, that's a simulationist approach. In a farming sim, it's like the time that your crops take to grow. So there's obviously not a complete taxonomy of games.
Yeah.
And it's not a strict division, and most games do at least some of these things to some degree.
Sure, but also sort of crossover into one where you're expecting another is the kind of thing that gets your audience to immediately rage quit.
Right, exactly.
If
Yes.
your simulation is interrupted by a lockpicking puzzle, you will immediately lose 30 people.
Right. Although, on the other hand, everyone loves a fishing minigame. Like, an optional minigame where it's now
Oh,
you can
I
do some
speak
puzzling
for
for
the
a bit is
people
really
who
popular.
despise the fishing minigame.
Oh, I never played the fishing minigames.
If you make them mandatory to complete any kind of, like,
Then it's bad.
to complete any kind of collection you have to have in game, I will not play your game.
Hmm.
I will simply
Exactly.
not.
It's because it switches modes of gameplay.
If you enforce switching modes of gameplay, you're going to start losing people.
This is why everyone hates a mandatory stealth quest.
Yeah. Mandatory hacking minigames. They can die.
Right. Like, mandatory engagement with a mechanic that is not the primary gameplay style. People tend not to like it because suddenly it's, in order to enjoy playing with this cool toy, you have to play with this other toy that is not so cool.
Yeah. This
And
this can be particularly hard as someone who doesn't like combat oriented, especially I don't mind turn-based combat, but like reaction time-based combat,
oh
I
yeah,
can't
I'm very
do it.
bad at those things.
This drives me nuts when it is made mandatory in any game. Because sometimes I do just want to wander around and make my little potions and not get attacked by beasts.
Yeah, I will play games where I know that they're RPGs with combat in them, but I
Yeah.
only play them when I'm in the mood for I want to play the combat RPG. If you're giving me a game that isn't that, except sometimes it is,
Mhm.
I will fail at those missions and then I will not finish the game because I am bad at reflexes.
Yeah.
So yeah, all games do but all games do a bit of all of these. Like any video game is in reality a complicated mechanical toy. Like
Yeah.
in physical terms, that's what a video game is. So there's some gamist approach required to be a video game.
You have to get pretty avant-garde to not be doing that.
Right. Similarly with narrative, I mean, you can give a human a bunch of toy soldiers and rules to have a battle with them, and it will not matter if you didn't explain why these armies are fighting. We will provide our own explanation.
Yeah.
Humans will come up with stories. We cannot be stopped.
There is no type of game for which someone has not written fan fiction.
Right. Absolutely. It's just toy soldiers on a tabletop. Yeah, but I'm going to decide that this soldier is recklessly brave and that one is sneaky. Humans will anthropomorphize. We will provide narrative. And even the most purely gamey type games, like pure puzzle things like Tetris. It's a toy that's fun to play with. It has no story, but it is still a simulation because it is simulating gravity and shapes. It's genuinely hard to conceive of what a game would look like that didn't have any simulationist aspects because it would have to have rules that didn't map onto anything in the universe, and I think that would be hard to play.
Good.
But within this taxonomy, which granted is limited, within this, Dwarf Fortress, extremely simulationist.
This is correct. And to be fair, this is why I was willing to give a go at playing it. Previous video games episodes have been hampered by the fact that we give ourselves a 2-week deadline to do the consuming the media
Yeah,
and coming up with our analysis. And playing video games takes time.
it does. Like, at some point, we'd like to do a bonus episode on Baldur's Gate 3, and the reason it will be a bonus episode is that game takes like 150 hours to play, even going fast.
There's a reason that there's relatively few games on the list, partly because we didn't put many on the list, but partly because video games are in the slightly difficult category of hard to rush through.
Right. So basically, the only games that are on the list are ones that I've already played and can talk about.
Or ones I've already played and can talk about, of which there are fewer, yes.
Yeah.
They're hard to rush through and also hard to acquire for free
Yeah.
through legal and functional means.
Right. Like you can watch playthroughs, but it's never going to be the same as actually playing the game.
Dwarf Fortress does have a free version, which I attempted
Mhm.
to acquire, and every time I launched it, my computer stopped working.
Yeah, which is unfortunate.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's extremely simulationist. And you can pause at any time, which I always value in a game.
Yes.
Please let me stop and think. I am bad at reflex.
Yeah, if you don't want me to stop and think, and you also have things that suddenly attack me, like if you have like a mines section where things jump out and if I don't react quickly enough I die, I'm just not gonna finish.
Just gonna die.
It's not gonna happen, my dude.
Right, I like platforming games, but every so often in the middle of the game, I will have to remind myself what the buttons do, even if I'm currently using the buttons. Like, I will just forget between one jump and the next what the jump button is.
I think the thing is, my adrenaline spiking hobby is watching horror movies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If I'm playing video games, it's usually either for satisfying brain puzzles reasons or for relaxation reasons, and I simply do not find giving myself a panic attack on purpose while trying to mash buttons relaxing.
You don't find that relaxing. Yeah, no, Dwarf
No,
Fortress is relaxing in the way spreadsheets are.
yeah,
It's very much, there are aspects of the gameplay where you hit pause and then you spend half an hour of real time working out how these work orders are going to interact to get your soap making industry going in a way
yeah.
where when they finish making some soap, they start the process over.
This is
I've
why
never
I was
quite cracked
actually
soap.
willing to give Dwarf Fortress a crack, at actually playing, in a way I wasn't with Elder Scrolls, partly because you can get Dwarf Fortress for free,
Yep,
which helps, but
yep.
also partly because to play it without needing a convenient cushion nearby for screaming into.
Yeah, even if you don't necessarily enjoy it, I don't think it's going to like make you emotionally frustrated the same way that a faster moving thing
Yeah.
would.
But yeah,
Um,
it's good. My understanding is like people can do a lot of things with it as a mechanism.
yes, yes, because it is so complicated. Um, you can come up with a playstyle. And people will be highly focused on getting their military going or
Yeah.
getting their trading processes
I love a
valuable.
game with that kind of versatility. Like I'm a relatively hardcore Sims builder. I know all my cheats and hotkeys inside out and backwards.
Hmm.
Um, I never actually play Sims like
Right,
as
you
in
don't play it as designed. You just do the builder.
no, I build things and sometimes I put characters in them and just like let them freewheel for a bit to see how they interact with the environment I've created, but then I get
Hmm.
bored and build more things.
Right, that is the Dwarf Fortress experience. Is eventually you
Yeah,
go, oh, my miners aren't doing something. I guess I will make some more fortress.
exactly.
What's the
I
thing I
love a
haven't
city
done yet?
builder.
Okay, lava time.
Yes. I like trying to construct impossible fictional locations in Sims. It's one of my main hobbies. I spend a lot of time wrestling with the game's engine, trying to convince it that floors can be in places where they definitely cannot be.
Glitching your Sims.
Just absolutely throwing my Sims off a cliff. It's like, yeah, good luck getting to that chicken coop I put on the top of the chimney. But it was
I'm picking up on a very
necessary.
different attitude to your Sims versus your kittens.
I never actually put the Sims in, is the difference.
Oh, I see.
I
They're
will
not
put them in
actually
for like
present
10
to be
minutes
glitched,
to see if I've managed to make the mechanics work, and if I haven't, I will watch them suffer for a while I try to figure out how to fix it.
and then you will fix it. Yeah.
But if I think I've done something clever with the bunk beds, I will just watch a sim try and fail to enter a bunk bed for 25 minutes while I resize and then resize again and then resize again the thing that I've put underneath it.
Until eventually they can get into the bunk bed.
Till eventually they can get into the bunk bed.
This is pretty much the Dwarf Fortress experience, I have to say.
And this is why I was willing to give it a go.
I spent like 10 minutes this week trying to work out why my miners were not digging out a particular area, and I was like, are they busy? Are they drunk? Yeah, this is things that can happen. Why are they? Have I got some mining somewhere else that I've forgotten about that's higher priority? And eventually I realized it was because when I had been designating the mining locations, I had, instead of working around the stairs, just gone straight over the stairs, and they had removed the stairs.
Well done.
So they could not, in fact, get to the floor they were supposed to be digging.
No.
So then I had to have them build some stairs.
My crowning Sims achievement is creating an entire underground ballroom, which featured like all kinds of plant life coming through the ceiling.
Oh, yes.
It took me so much time because I realized the only way to do it was to individually plant every single I had to get every single plant individually placed along the rafters and then
Yeah.
raise them up from the floor in the like lower level. Oh my god, it took so long.
Right, but the aesthetic.
Oh, but the underground ballroom, it was incredible.
I want an underground ballroom.
It was amazing. It was my crowning achievement. The current one I'm working on is I'm trying to do one of those glass floored boats.
Oh,
Nobody
yeah,
likes
yeah.
it. I've been wrestling with the game engine so much.
And in many ways, Dwarf Fortress is a game engine.
Yeah.
Like there is, you start in a particular situation. The only like goal of the game is survive.
Yeah.
But even then, the catchphrase is that losing is fun. Which so in order to play the game, you have to accept that sooner or later all your dwarves might die.
This is the main reason I haven't played it, despite the aforementioned
Yeah, I
reasons
set one of my miners
I
on
would.
fire this week. It was quite sad.
No!
I was like, go down there to the depths of the bowels of the earth, and please dig into the side of this giant pool of lava so we can have cool smelters. And they didn't leave quite fast enough, so they caught fire.
Yeah, I got stressed out when I recommended Kittens game to a friend, and she immediately killed 1,000 kittens because a fire alarm went off while she was just starting.
What an amazing problem to have! I have
She'd only
killed
put in
1,000
one hut.
kittens in Minecraft.
She only had one hut, but she didn't have enough fields, and she had to evacuate the building. So by the time she came back, the hut had repopulated and then died enough times to kill 1,000 kittens.
Amazing.
These are the
Yeah, Dwarf
problems I
Fortress
have
is
in
a
life.
game that you
That's
can
what
lose
haunts me.
by failing to pause when the house catches fire.
Yeah.
uh, it does keep going. It has a persistence of world that allows for you to create these little narratives.
Yeah.
So, it does simulate a huge amount of things. I'm not primarily wanting to focus on like individual bits of what it simulates. 'Cause the complexity of the simulation absolutely is a big part of why I enjoy playing this game, but it doesn't really tell us that much. I think it's not very interesting to ask why Tarn Adams thought it was worthwhile to keep track of like heat or light levels or dirt or make the chickens a little bit fightier than the ducks when they get crowded. That's all in one big bucket we can call the world is complex. It is a simulation of a complex world, and the real world also has heat and light and dirt and chickens. Putting them in the game is imitative, and how many layers of imitation you want to include is like an important design choice in a game, but it's not as creatively interesting to me as the decision to program into the world that sometimes a dwarf will get such an intense bolt of inspiration that they will drop everything else in their life to go and work on it until they either create an unparalleled masterwork or go mad from frustration and die.
Oh, I love that.
Right, and that is not strictly simulationist. That is not how it is to have a creative inspiration, but it is how it feels. Like, sometimes you get a strange mood and you have to go and make a thing, or you die. That is how
Right.
it feels.
Yeah, it does.
I feel like the programmer of this game has been dealing with a strange mood for like 15 years.
I feel like this is the experience that the programmer of this game had while
Yeah,
programming this game.
exactly. It's been going on for a very long time, but they have to make this. This is the thing they have to make.
Yeah.
And that rolls around to another thing, which is this is a significant thing about Dwarf Fortress. You, the player, give orders. You do not control the dwarves.
Love that. Yeah.
You cannot control the dwarves. The dwarves make their own decisions. Like, there is a dirtiness score. Dwarves have the game keeps track of how dirty the dwarf is. It's invisible to the player. You can't see it. It affects like how well they recover from injuries and stuff.
Mm.
In order to reduce that invisible score, which improves survivability of everyone in general, you have to give them soap. So you just have to make soap out of like fat, and you make lye from burning wood, and then you combine the fat with the lye and you make soap. When you give them soap, they decide for themselves whether it's time to go and wash.
Helpful.
Right? One of the things that is simulated is like a limited kind of free will, because you can't control the dwarves.
Yeah.
You can't make anything happen in the fort except by the mediation of the dwarves. You
Right.
can designate this is where I want the mining to happen, but you can't mine it out. The dwarves mine it out, and they might be busy or asleep, or they might stop in the middle of digging their stairs to rescue the friend who's fallen in the river because they want to go and get a drink. They will do that. It'll just happen. This feels like an interesting thing to look at to me, like an interesting little nugget of something to focus on. Which is the dwarves exist as individuals. You are an invisible god directing the fortress, and you can set the to-do list, but the dwarves get to decide what they actually do, and they can ignore you, or at least they can ignore what you think their job is, and decide to spend all day collecting wood from outside and cleaning the walls, they can spend all day in the pub once you build one. They can spend all day in the temple or throwing tantrums because they didn't get a solid platinum chest of drawers in their bedroom. That is not a hyperbolic example. That was happening in the game I was playing this week.
Mood.
The queen, she really wanted a solid platinum chest of drawers, and I kept not building it, and she was not happy. She was not pleased. There is something fascinating about having this kind of sandbox building game and not being able to actually control it. Like most sandbox games, like things like building in Sims or playing Minecraft or something like that, you control the world directly. In Dwarf Fortress, you are management. You write a to-do list. The dwarves mostly get around to it, but they don't have to. So that says something about like the kind of world that is being imitated. Is a world where individuals exist and make choices and have preferences. Because each of the dwarves, because they are procedurally generated, is unique. And one of the things that is generated is the preferences. They have traits like how strong they are, how tall they are. They have skills when they come into existence. And they have preferences. A dwarf will have a favorite food. Most of the time, it's not critically important what their favorite food is, but they have a favorite food. They will preferentially eat that favorite food, and if they eat that favorite food, it will make them happier. And happiness, it happiness is as vital to manage as food and defense against invaders, because you can and will lose your fort to the dwarves being unhappy. One of the ways to lose a
One of the
dwarf
things is
fortress,
being simulated.
right? It's one of the things being simulated and tracked. It's one of the things that matters to keep track of is how happy the dwarves are. They will get happy thoughts from eating and drinking things they like, from having nice objects around them, from spending time with their family, from socializing. They will get unhappy thoughts from being hungry, being frightened, being caught in the rain, having to sleep on the floor. Will give them unhappy thoughts. And if you do not pay attention to, are your little worker bees happy? Eventually, they get into something called a tantrum spiral. Because an unhappy dwarf eventually either slips into depression and stops eating and dies, or
Not good.
there's one called, I think, going stark raving mad, where they take off all their clothes and just run around and stop eating and drinking and die.
Also not good.
Also not good. Or they go berserk and just murder anyone in sight until they are killed.
Very not good.
Right. Furthermore, one of the biggest unhappy thoughts a dwarf can get is when their friends and family die. So when a dwarf is very unhappy and they go mad and die, all of their family and friends get a big lowering in happiness because their friend or family member just died. And then they start having tantrums and smashing things up and going mad and dying, and then it's a spiral. It just goes on and gets worse. If you don't pay attention to happiness, everyone will die. Your whole endeavor will completely fail. Your plan to colonize Mars will not work because your dwarves are too sad. This is an interesting choice as to a thing to put in the game and make fundamental to your fortress surviving. Like, you can actually pretty much ignore defense if you put the fort in a place that doesn't have enemies nearby. If you just put a drawbridge is basically impenetrable at the moment. If you put a drawbridge outside your fortress and anytime anything dangerous comes on the map, you close the drawbridge. You don't have to have the dwarves have a military at all. You do have to care about their happiness. The fort will cease to exist if the dwarves are not happy.
My understanding from the Let's Plays and speedrun you sent me is that for this reason there are some load-bearing taverns.
Yes. Basically, you get to a point, like you don't have to have a tavern instantly, but within like the first year or so, you need to give the dwarves a tavern. You need to give them a temple so they can go and pray, because it makes them unhappy to not be able to pray for too long. eventually you start getting noble dwarves, and they have specific expectations of how nice their quarters are going to be. And if you do not meet those expectations and give them their solid platinum cabinets, they get a recurring unhappy thought, because not only is their room not pretty enough, but also their orders are being ignored, which makes them unhappy because they're the queen. Similarly, alcohol is load bearing. Physically, the dwarves can survive indefinitely drinking water. A dwarf will only drink water if there is no alcohol available, and they get an unhappy thought every time they have to drink water. The dwarves, they do not like drinking water. So a brewing industry is like the first thing you have to set up. You get on the map and you're like, great, please dig a small hole. Now everyone go indoors, and here is a kitchen and here is a still. Get that going. Okay, that's like day one stuff, because if you don't have a still, if they can't brew alcohol, you are not going to last long.
I love to play British Village Simulator.
They're dwarves, they are described. If you every dwarf, if you just sort of the equivalent of like hover the mouse over something to see what it is, it'll say this is a cat, this is a dog. The little tagline on the dwarf is they are described as a small creature fond of drink and industry. It's just fundamental to what the dwarf is it's a creature that likes drinking. What is not simulated particularly is getting drunk. Like, drinking alcohol does not reduce their skill in any way because they're dwarves, I guess.
I feel like that would cause many problems.
I feel like this is one of the ways in which dwarves are different from humans, is that humans do get drunk and it causes problems, but it doesn't seem to be an issue for the dwarves. Although this is a sufficiently highly simulated game that if you have spillages of alcohol and then the cats walk through it, they can get drunk. But then they just become full of alcohol. It's many times the interactions of the rules themselves are very funny. Like, it's not a game that is funny in the way of the story is funny. It's a game that is funny in the way of this dwarf has a fondness for socks and appears to be wearing 8 pairs at once, and also they're the mayor.
Yeah, I feel
and they're
like
walking around wearing a hoodie and 8 pairs of socks.
you mentioned the beehives earlier. I feel that my main interaction with Dwarf Fortress, apart from you and my one other friend who is obsessed with it telling me about it, is it's a big featurer in roundups of like funny game dev notes.
Yes, funny bug fixes.
Like, I would say funny bug fixes are very Dwarf Fortress in the same way that like leaked military secrets are very War Games.
Right, specific to War Thunder.
Yeah, very War Thunder, and like breaking the Geneva Convention is a tried and true classic of all games.
All games love to put the red cross on their first aid boxes.
But this is just something I associate with being a game that has the comedy beat dev notes explaining something completely ridiculous.
Right, game no longer breaches the Geneva Convention. Picking up a beehive no longer causes your fort to be destroyed by monsters.
Yeah.
No longer possible to make fireproof dwarves. I think that glitch has been fixed. Except it's not a glitch. It's just a unintended interaction of rules that do work as intended, because creatures are modeled as having layers of like anatomy. So they're modeled as having bones and muscles and intestines and subcutaneous fat and skin. And it turns out it's the subcutaneous fat that catches fire. And there was, at least for a while, a way to systematically torture your dwarves by like basically bouncing them back and forth between lava and water to put them out again, where you could just burn off all of their subcutaneous fat over time and then they became fireproof.
Amazing.
This is, of course, extremely unkind for anyone who is inclined to create narrative, but it used to work.
Sure, but not everybody is inclined to create narrative. Some people want to see number go up. I think back, I think ages ago in a previous episode, we mentioned the roller coaster tycoon hack, where one of the best ways to make your park successful was if you threw people off a roller coaster to their death, but they didn't die in the park.
Yeah, they die outside the park.
That doesn't count. What you could actually do, if you got the trajectory right, was you could throw them into the neighboring competitors' theme park and tank their race.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes the
Sometimes
desire
people want to see number go up.
to have
Sometimes
real
you wish.
people is just subordinate to the desire to see number go up.
Yeah. Sometimes you just want a really effective military, so you put all of the children in a room together and fill the room with low damage traps so they can practice dodging.
Yeah. You wouldn't do that to real children,
I would not
probably,
do that to real children,
but
but
you like
it's
to
kind of
see
okay
number
to do it to your
go up.
dwarves.
I do sometimes, while again, I get like quite nervous about these kinds of games. I feel too bad to do these things, but I do sometimes like really enjoy myself thinking what when I'm doing something like weird Sims challenges and I keep having to bring in Sims to try out whether the mechanics are working. I do like to
Yeah.
imagine what they think is happening. Just like
What's their experience here?
they keep trying to go upstairs, and every time the like weirdly installed banister has moved an inch to the left until eventually they can go up the stairs.
Right. What does it feel like to be a sim slowly glitching through the furniture?
Like, what do they think is happening when I am adjusting the curved wall millimeter by millimeter to try and create Cerebro under the X Mansion?
Right. Right. I mean, that is
Very hard
very
to make
much
things
a.
wheelchair accessible in The Sims without mods, let alone build giant circular domes underground
No.
that are wheelchair accessible.
But it is very much both those games, like Sims and Dwarf Fortress. It's interesting to look at the question of you, the player, what are you within the
Are you a
world?
god? Are you an architect?
Right. Are you some kind of management consultant? What are you?
When
In
I am
in
trying to make
write-ups of Dwarf
my
Fortress.
underground ballroom, who hired me to do this?
Right.
And
Because
what do they think about the amount of time I am spending on trying to get the lights at the right angle?
yeah, 7 dwarves have gone out into the wilderness. One of the first things I will do is appoint one of them to be the manager who will handle things like approving work orders. So what am I? The entity issuing the work orders?
Mm.
Because they won't. Like, if I don't tell them to make food and drink, they won't. Like, I control the to-do list. There are some things they will do automatically, like cleaning, but they won't do anything as complex as make objects. But if I do put it on the to-do list, sometimes they will do things that are on the to-do list, and sometimes they will go to bed.
Yeah.
I'm not the manager. The manager is one of them. has to work in a little office and tally up the stock levels and things, and won't do it unless they've got an office, which is one of the easiest ways in the early game for nothing to be working.
Yeah.
You didn't give your manager somewhere to sit down. But if they're the manager, who am I? Am I God? Is God marking out this is where we're going to dig everyone's bedrooms? Please put a table here. Is this a very interventionist God?
I love the idea of management as priests and vice versa.
Right. Is the manager an important person because they are the one hearing the voice?
And also, are they invoicing God?
Well, that's an interesting point because Dwarf Fortress doesn't really have an economy. I mean, it does. There is an economy in the sense of you trade with caravans from your own civilization, and if available nearby, also elves and humans will come and
Mhm.
trade with you. And you need value to do that, but it is barter. So they account things in dwarf bucks. And the value of an object, of course, because this is Dwarf Fortress, isn't just what is the object, but what is the material it's made of, and how well was it made, and what is the decorative material, and how well was it decorated. All of that feeds into how many dwarf bucks is it worth. But you actually are bartering, you're not making coins. There was, in some early versions, a rental economy, but it tended to produce tantrum spirals because in order to make the rental economy work, you had to have a significant number of your dwarves in extremely bad accommodation. Because if you made the bedrooms nicer, they would no longer be able to afford the rent. So it's it's an accurate simulation. Either you have slums, or you have homeless people. Like, these are your two choices. The rent is low enough somewhere, or it isn't. It turns out if you slice off the bottom of the rental market and don't change anything else, what you've done is cut a lot of people out of housing.
Has anyone told the government about this?
I don't think so. I like the idea of making the housing minister play Dwarf Fortress. I don't think it would help, but it would be funny.
I mean, we've tried several other things. It's got to be worth a go.
It couldn't hurt.
I
Well,
mean, as steps to implement before throwing bricks through car windows,
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
it seems a lot more peaceable.
We are presenting our demands. Our demands are you must play Dwarf Fortress. It will teach you something. But that is not in the current version. Like the rental economy isn't currently there. I assume it's
Yeah.
to be implemented in the future once some level of it being actually possible to have a long-term functional fortress once you turn the rental economy on has been
Yeah.
implemented. I assume is a plan for future development. But the dwarf buck is just an accounting fiction, really.
Mm.
It is a proxy for quality. What dwarves like? Dwarves like being around expensive things, but I think it's as much, the expense comes from the quality of manufacture and the quality of decoration, and is it encrusted with diamonds and things? And they just like nice stuff. The nice stuff is also expensive in a sort of arbitrary accounting way. But what they like is that it's nice.
And that's fair.
And that is fair.
Who can fault an individual for liking things to be nice?
Liking things to be nice is very customary. But yeah, so where I was going with that is one of the fundamental constraints of Dwarf Fortress is you only have what you have. If you want platinum, then either you find it on the map and you dig it out and smelt it, or you trade for it. Those are your options. Like, you have to get it from somewhere. It has to... You as the god of this map, of this fortress, you as the god of this fortress cannot say, make platinum exist, and have it exist. The world pre-exists you and has constraints, and there are material constraints of, is there wood? Are there trees on your map? There are not trees on every map. Is there sand? Because if there's no sand, you're not getting glass.
Mm.
Or you're trading for sand in small quantities, which is important to do because sooner or later you will have a dwarf who gets a strange mood, like that inspiration that they will either complete or perish requires glass, and if you don't have any, they will die. So it's important to
You
get
want
some
to avoid
glass
Yeah.
from the caravan. Just a little couple of bits, just to have in storage for the time when somebody needs it for their inspiration. Similarly, you need to have some gems and cloth lying around the place because they're going to want it.
Yeah.
But you have this, not just here is a sandbox you can play with, but there's a persistence of you get what you've got or what you can trade for. There's no command line for. I mean, I'm sure you can get mods that will let you cheat in these ways, but the game as designed to be played, you can't just make things exist. They either exist or they don't. You have to get them by built-in ways or do without. Which I think is of a piece for me with, in general, this is a world where things persist.
Mm.
Like when you generate a world to play in, the first thing it does is generate the geography by going through several steps of like creating mountains and running rivers across the land that has been produced and calculating how much rainfall there is and using that to assign deserts and forests and things. And then, having created the geography, it starts the world at year zero and calculates forward a history of the world until the point where you have told it to stop, like however many hundreds of years. And that calculation determines where pre-existing settlements are. So you can't start on top of those, but they exist for you to trade with or fight with. What artifacts of like legendary quality exist in the world? What books have been written? Are there any necromancers? That's determined during this phase, and where they live is determined during this phase.
Love that.
Right. And even playing on Fortress, like history mode will let you go and look at all of that, but even playing on Fortress mode, when you tell your dwarves, okay, please beautify this room by carving on the walls, they will start off by being like, I have done a carving of shapes because I am not good at carving yet. Once they get good at carving, likewise with sculpting statues, they will start to produce scenes from history and legend.
Okay.
So you'll say, please beautify this room with carving, and they'll be like, I an extremely skilled engraver, have produced an image of this famous dwarven hero striking down this giant that attacked that fortress in the year 49. Stuff exists and continues to exist. They don't just make that out of nowhere. That is an event that happened, and that's why they carved it.
That.
There's something there. There's something sort of fundamental about simulating not just the heat levels on each square on the map, but a world that continues to exist whether you're currently looking at it or not. One of the things the caravans do is bring you the news of what's going on in the world in the broad strokes of a fort has been founded here, or there's a battle happened there. This one has been abandoned.
Mm.
There's something about that, and there's something about the dwarves existing as individuals that is interesting to me as this is a fundamental of the world, is that it exists outside of you. It has its own features. It's not actually fungible. Nothing in Dwarf Fortress is equivalent to anything else in Dwarf Fortress. Each of these dwarves has their own personality and preferences and skills and physical abilities. Each of these items, when you say make me 12 tables, they will make you 12 tables, but the game will keep track of what material each table is and how well it was made. And it will exist as a separate entity within the game's logic that can be decorated or destroyed or traded away, but it will never get interchanged with some other table. It's this table. Things have uniqueness.
Yeah.
And especially the dwarves. The dwarves are not interchangeable. You can absolutely, as a player, say, you're currently designated as a fisher, and you are currently designated as a carpenter, and I want you to swap jobs. And they will, in the sense of what you've done there is change the permissions for what jobs they're allowed to pick up. But it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be good at the jobs that you've assigned them.
Right.
Because there were underlying traits that made them have those professions in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
As well as the skills. There are also, are they dexterous? Do they hate the rain? So this has been a more bitty analysis of looking at stuff than some of them, because this is a school of looking at little bits and picking them out. And this is a text that's very hard to break down to sentences.
Sure.
But I think there are some interesting conclusions. The first one is, of course, the world is complex. That's something this work believes, is that the world is complicated. It says you are constrained by your circumstances, but you can choose the tasks you perform within the constraints you're facing. You're not interchangeable with any other person. Your happiness is not an optional extra, and you must create. When inspiration strikes, you must answer it. It is right or die. You must carve a single perfect sapphire. You must make a legendary llama wool sock. You can survive grief and you can survive hardship, but you cannot go on existing unless you create. And I don't know if that's the message that Tarn Adams wants me to take away from Dwarf Fortress, but it's the one I'm finding here.
Yeah, I think that's a cogent analysis.
I find it very hopeful in some ways.
Yeah, it's lovely in a way.
Yeah, you are a little weird creature doing tasks and living underground and decorating your bed with hanging rings of bone because you like that sort of thing. But also sometimes the universe will grant to you a vision of the most beautiful anvil that has ever been conceptualized. And then you just have to go and make it because that's what life is about. And as a person who sometimes makes things, it does feel like that.
It does. Sometimes I am simply possessed by writing demons.
Right. And then you have to do it.
Because otherwise you simply cannot get on with your daily life because all of your thoughts are replaced by thoughts of the words.
Right. The to-do list may say, I need to go and do my groceries, but the to-do list is wrong because what I'm doing right now is making a thing.
It's because you think you're being presented with a binary choice of I can sit down and write the thing, or I can go to Sainsbury's and buy my groceries. But the choices you actually have are I can sit down and write the thing, or I can go to Sainsbury's and stare blankly at the citrus options whilst thinking about the thing I want to write.
Right. The inspiration doesn't go away if you ignore it.
No,
It just
makes
becomes
it
a source of
harder.
stress.
it just makes it harder to remember what kind of pasta you were supposed to be buying.
Right. So, listener, next time inspiration strikes, remember that you are a small and industrious creature, and it's vitally important that you answer the call of nature and go and make a sock.
And next time that you are in the supermarket and you see somebody just completely
Staring.
staring into space, looking at two different brands of sauce like they contain the answers to the universe, cut them.
Consider that person is possessed of a divine vision.
I love that conclusion.
Yeah, honestly, the way I usually make enough trade goods is I just create dwarven ready meals
Yeah.
because cooked food is both valuable and doesn't appear to have a shelf life. I assume this is a glitch that will eventually be programmed out, but food lasts forever once you've cooked it. Actually, food lasts forever once it's in a food storage area. It's just that raw food is not very valuable, but well cooked ready meals are a highly valuable trade good.
I love that. I mean, you have convinced me that I would want to give Dwarf Fortress a go. Maybe not enough to crash my laptop again. If anybody would like to send us a Steam voucher for the cost of £24.99, aka one Dwarf Fortress, we will dedicate a special episode to you.
We
I
will
feel
spend it
confident.
on Dwarf Fortress, and we will do a playthrough of Dwarf Fortress, and
I will
it'll be
do
interesting.
the most stressed live stream you have ever seen in your life.
Yep.
Like
A
when I
tantrum
say I
spiral will
don't
occur among the players.
when I say I don't usually play video games because I find many of them stress me out, the degree to which I get stressed out by this is genuinely comical.
I think somebody probably will pay for us to do this, and I'm looking forward to introducing you to the joys of cancellation messages that say so and so cancelled, feed prisoner, reason searching for baby. Which means they have given birth in the middle of whatever task they were doing and just picked up the baby and carried on.
Yeah, this is a game I enjoyed watching other people play.
That is honestly a pretty good commendation.
I did not have to experience the choice paralysis. It
Right,
was
you
great.
didn't have to. They weren't your dwarves dying.
Exactly. I didn't feel responsible for the untold deaths of dwarves.
I sent you a nice one where they played the game for real and only murdered some of the dwarves on purpose, rather
Yeah.
than the one I originally started watching where they were like, I'm going to make these dwarves as miserable as possible to maximize the number of ghosts I get.
Yeah, I did start recommending some odd playthroughs.
Yeah. And I did also get you to watch a speedrun because Dwarf Fortress does have the funniest speedrun category, which is hell percent or so fun percent is getting all your dwarves killed. Hell percent is when you dig into hell, which is a thing you can do in Dwarf Fortress. Hell is a place and it's under your feet. You can, if you dig down far enough, the demons come out and kill you all. Some people have colonized hell because if your military is good enough, you can fight the demons.
Nice.
I have never achieved this, but I have lost many thoughts to trying.
Okay, is that Dwarf Fortress?
That is Dwarf Fortress.
Okay. So we actually have something quite special to introduce next.
We do, we do. We are still rolling 2 dice, but listener, they are different dice.
Yes. So, as Duck took on the burden of doing our very first analysis many episodes ago with Howl's Moving Castle,
That was a long time ago.
I have agreed to do our show-stopping finale, for which I will be rolling 2 101-sided die to get 2 different media properties, and we are going to be doing a compare and contrast.
Yep.
That
This could be very silly.
That which you will all remember fondly from GCSE English.
Compare and contrast these 2 war poems.
Yeah. I don't think I've done a compare and contrast essay since A level. I don't think this was something I covered at university. But I'm actually looking forward to it. We have
yeah.
I think this time I will mention we have caveated this a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is we are still only giving ourselves a fortnight to do this. So we are going to limit it to maximum 1 thing I haven't consumed before that will take me more than a couple of hours.
Right. We are aiming for physically possible to do this analysis in 2 weeks. So if we roll another giant video game, we will re-roll that one because it won't be possible.
Yeah, if I roll 2 different TV series I've never seen,
yeah,
we're going to hit up on how many hours are there physically in a day barrier.
Right. So we're going to be a little kind to DR on this one. I was going to say
Yeah.
to ourselves, and I was like, actually, you're doing all the work, so that was stealing valor.
We're going to be a little
We're
bit
going to
kind
aim
to
for
ourselves on the time front.
right.
Maybe not on the content front.
Right. If they're silly but physically possible, then we're stuck with it.
This is the silly but physically possible show.
That's true. That's true. Shall
Before
we
I do
roll
any
some
rolling,
dice?
are we going to keep Dwarf Fortress in the hat?
I think we should swap it out just because we only have so many video games.
Yeah.
It's good to explore the terrain more. Which category is it actually in? Because video game
The
wasn't
one that we
category.
were planning on getting rid of after this series ends.
Oh, that's true. We are going to, and we should, and this is useful information for the listener as well. We are going to review everything that's in the hat for
Yes,
season 2. So if you have something that you desperately want us to put in the hat, genuinely, just let us know. We will consider it.
Yeah, now is the time to be sending us emails. We are particularly in the market for things that are just in genres neither of us reads that much, which I think you probably will have gotten a grasp on by now.
Yep.
It's a lot of lit fic, book club fiction, romance.
Yeah, we just don't normally read a lot of that for ourselves.
Yeah. It is movies. We didn't put too many of this time
We
around. We're looking for
slightly
movies.
forgot cinema existed.
Yeah, we forgot to put movies, which was not our proudest moment.
But we've remembered now, so they'll be in the hat next time.
Yeah, so send us your movie demands.
Yep.
And just anything that like maybe isn't that well known, but that you really want to hear people sink their teeth into.
Yeah, send us the things that took over your brain and rewired your neurology age 12.
And feel free to get silly with it. Like it doesn't have to be a traditional type of media. If there is a game show or a condiment or a hymn or a just weird little poem that's maybe 4 or 5 lines long, but that's stayed in your brain rent free since you first read it in middle school,
Send
hit
it
us
our
up.
way.
We want to do it.
We do.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are we replacing Dwarf Fortress with, just on the off chance that I immediately roll it again?
I can't remember what category we did put it in.
It's in Hot Topics. So trendy.
Even on the Steam version coming out, I think that was a stretch.
I don't remember how long ago we wrote this, but probably.
I'm going to replace it with something wholly unrelated, but an actual recent movie. Let's put Nosferatu in.
Hey, I hope I get that. I really
Actually a hot topic.
I loved that film, so I'm very happy with that. I now need to replace it twice. Okay, so I'm going to roll my first 101-sided die. Let's go. 84. That is Dear Evan Hansen, the musical.
Okay.
Okay, this could go in many directions.
So Dear Evan Hansen's interesting.
Yeah, this could go so wrong. Okay, my second 101-sided die. Okay. 56, which is... Oh! It's another video game. Zero Escape, but it's one I've actually played, so we can do this.
Oh, fabulous. I've not played this one, but I will check out a Let's Play or something.
This is going to be difficult, but I think I can make this work.
Okay, fabulous. Are we starting from well, it's both of these works have people in them level of similarity?
Yes.
We'd have to go all the way back to they've got gravity.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. I feel like both of those are comfortably in the they're not well known, but people
have heard
enough
of these.
people will have heard of them to not make this hard to listen to.
Yeah, I'm excited for this completely inappropriate compare and contrast pairing.
This is going to be difficult. I am excited. I think
Fantastic.
you'll like the game. I can't promise you'll like Dear Evan Hansen. I haven't seen it.
I have. I must have been the one who put it on the list.
I've listened to 1 or 2 of the songs more than once. I think I have listened to a decent portion of the soundtrack just because it comes up on randomly shuffled Broadway playlists.
Yeah, actually, to be fair, I don't think I've seen Dear Evan Hansen. I think I've heard the songs from Dear Evan Hansen.
Heard at least 3 of them. So I guess the next thing I'm going to do is watch Dear Evan Hansen.
I'm excited for this. This is so silly.
This is a ridiculous project. All right, well, I hope that the reader... I'm struggling today. I really hope that the listener has enjoyed what has happened so far on this deeply silly project that we've been doing, and I hope that they are all along for the ride with our final episode, a compare and contrast of Dear Evan Hansen, the musical, and Zero Escape, the video game series.
A normal and highly academic thing to do.
This makes so much sense.
See you next time, listener. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Analysis Roulette, a podcast applying a randomly selected mode of analysis to a randomly selected creative work, just to see what happens. Your hosts have been Dia and Duck. You can find us on Spotify or on YouTube, and if you'd like to get in touch, you can send us an email at analysisroulette@gmail.com. And remember, if you like our show, share it with your friends, and if you don't like our show, share it with your enemies. Thanks.